Hello and welcome to StratNews Global. I'm Surya Gandadharan. The situation in Syria appears to have taken a turn, with Turkish and Russian-supported Syrian forces creating some kind of a confrontation. Exactly what is going on?
I have with me Mr. Talmiz Ahmed. He was India's former ambassador to Saudi Arabia, to Oman and to the UAE, and is a scholar and researcher on the region. Sir, welcome to this interview and thank you. So what do you make of this, the situation developing now in Syria? Is this a new stage of the conflict? Are we looking at Syria 2.0?
So far, Russia and Turkey have been attempting to work together to bring peace to the region and to reconcile their differences. However, it is now clear that they have fundamental differences with regard to the future of Syria. As far as Turkey is concerned, they are very clear that they wish to have a military presence in North Syria, that this presence should be supported by local assets that they have built up in the shape of the Syrian National Army and their links with the extremist elements, as also to control the aspirations of the Syrian Kurds. So this is very clear as far as they are concerned. The reason why this situation has escalated is because we are now reaching end game. As far as the Syrian government is concerned, they are looking at retaking Idlib. Idlib is the last bastion which is now in rebel hands, and it is here that you find the differences between Turkey and Russia coming to the fore. What does Russia want? Russia supports the Syrian government in insisting on the territorial integrity of Syria and the removal of all foreign elements from within the Syrian borders and the crushing of extremist elements. So here, the Syrian-Russian position is in conflict with what the aspirations of the Turks are. Now, the Turks have been trying to make some kind of an arrangement with the Russians in terms of which they would retain a presence in the north and continue to work with the extremist elements. Now, this is not acceptable to Russia or to Syria because the extermination of the extremists in the shape of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is the former Jabhat Nusra, is of paramount importance. Now here what has happened is, over the last few days, Turkey has rushed in a lot of its own soldiers into the region. So you have now a situation where Turkish soldiers are actually facing Syrian soldiers on the ground, and that there are Russian Air Force elements which are in the sky controlling the airspace. This is a very dangerous situation.
So are we now, is there some kind of a recognition that neither side wants more conflict and they are talking to each other? Is that evident?
Russia and Turkey are in continuous dialogue with each other. Even as I am speaking to you, there is a Russian delegation in Ankara. They have been there for the last 2 or 3 days, and they are attempting to work on various compromise solutions. A compromise solution that Russia had offered Turkey on 18th February was to provide for a safe zone of about 15 kilometers at the border, that this safe zone would be patrolled by the Russians, but in the meantime, that the Turkish troops would have to withdraw from the region, would have to vacate the region, and this region would be occupied by Syrian government forces. And the highways would be opened, though these highways would be monitored by both Turks as well as Russians. This compromise formula is not acceptable to Turkey because it requires the Turks to give up their military presence in North Syria entirely. Now, this is not part of their game plan. I personally see the Turkish posture as very unreasonable as seeking to intervene militarily in the political affairs of another neighboring country, not respecting the sovereignty of their country, of that country, and seeking to impose on that country their own political agenda.
It would appear to us that President Erdogan is on committed to kind of overreach, strategic overreach in a sense. Would
It
you
seems
agree with
like
that?
that. I agree with you. President Erdogan is functioning like as an extraordinary conjurer, attempting to hold on to several balls which are now in the air. He has, so far, his credibility has been affirmed primarily on account of the fact that he has been working with Russia and has expanded very substantial bilateral ties with Russia at the expense of his links with his NATO members and with the United States.
Yeah.
He has also pursued the relationship by purchasing the S-400 missile system, which has angered the Americans quite a bit. At the same time, the Americans have not actually given up on him so far. He enjoys support from Donald Trump, who allowed Turkey to enter the Kurdish areas in October, militarily to enter the Kurdish areas in October. At the same time, in terms of the present standoff that Syria has with Russia and with Syria, the United States has extended support to the Turkish position. The United States' interest is in getting Turkey back into the Western fold and to dilute its relations with the Russians. At the same time, Turkey's ties with Russia have been of considerable importance to Turkey. This relationship is military, it is energy based, it is economic, it is political. So we have a situation where I think Turkey has seriously overreached itself. Its interests lie in actually working with Russia rather than making Russia an antagonist. Recently, Turkey has gone across the Mediterranean and built up a very strong relationship with the Libyan government in Tripoli and has also entered into a sort of maritime agreement which would extend Turkey's role in the Mediterranean waters in connection with the gas reserves. Now, here again, in Libya, Turkey has to work with Russia. But Russia, as of now, is supporting the other side. And if Turkey has any interest that it wants to safeguard, it has to work with Russia. Therefore, I am unable to understand how far Erdogan can go in alienating the Russians. I personally feel that any rational Turkish leader would sometime now come to an accommodation with the Russians in Syria so that his larger interests in the region are served.
What are the Russians telling Erdogan? Do they want the Turkish troops to pull out of Syria completely?
That is the, I would say, medium term goal. I don't think the Russians want to see foreign troops there. The
Yeah.
Turks have been there. They came in on the basis or justifying their presence that they are concerned about the expansion of the Kurdish presence at the Turkish-Syrian border, and they described the Syrian Kurds as affiliates of their own dissident PKK elements. Now,
Yeah.
in this regard, Russia accommodated them. They have carried out so far 3 military incursions into Kurdish territory and have been able to safeguard their interests. But this is a time-bound intervention. It's what these Russians have said, that the integrity of Syria comes first and the accommodation of Kurds within the integrated Syria is of paramount importance. That means once Turkish interests have been served with regard to the possible, they had to control the aspirations for so-called independence on the part of the Kurds. Once that has been taken care of, there is no justification for the Turkish presence. The Turks had committed themselves to fighting the extremists. But what we now see is actually Erdogan is attempting to co-opt the extremists to his fold and to boost his own military presence in North Syria with the help not of the moderates but of the extremists. Now, this is
Yeah.
not acceptable at all to Syria or to Russia or to anyone who has concerns about the extremist elements in the region.
So when we try and look at a possible end game here, it is either Erdogan, pulling out completely, or do you see some kind of a further conflict now developing?
You see, we have a very confusing scenario. We have a rational understanding of foreign affairs in terms of which countries calculate their interests in a rational manner, in a
Yeah.
restrained manner, and attempt to get the best of a bad situation. That is rationality. But Turkish scholars and observers have been saying over the last couple of days that there is an atmosphere of lunacy, an atmosphere of insanity in Ankara today. And it includes the president. It also includes a number of his extreme right wing supporters within Turkey. Some extraordinarily belligerent remarks have been made by some of his political associates, including let Turkish troops enter Syria and capture Damascus. Things like that. So, we are, on the one hand, I would suggest to you that reason demands a Turkish stand down, accommodation with the Russians, making the best of a bad situation, looking at an arrangement that would serve Syrian as well as Turkish interests, and then trying to thin out their own military presence and accommodate the Syrian government. But when you are seized by lunacy, another word for that would be hubris, when you are drunk with the sense of your own power, you tend to do very foolish things. As you saw on day one of the conflict today, already 33 Turkish troops have
Yeah.
been killed.
Yeah.
How is the president going to justify these deaths to his own people? It may encourage him, I fear, to escalate the conflict because now he has to show his people that I have got something back for the sacrifices that the armed forces have made. So I see this as a scenario of very serious complexity because a president has seriously overreached himself and appears to be seized with hubris and possibly even lunacy.
So let's step back and just look at the Syrian position today, President Bashar al-Assad. Would you say he is now today in a more powerful position than ever before in this conflict?
See, there are many facets to the Syrian imbroglio. What we can agree upon is that the Syrian armed forces have done well for themselves over the last few years and are now in control of about 60% of their national territory. On that, there is agreement. But having said this, immediately you have to concede a large number of serious problems. Firstly, the military scenario is still unresolved. The scenario relating to the Idlib countryside and Idlib town itself, it remains unresolved. Turkish forces are still there, and no agreement has been entered into so far. So that remains a serious unfinished business. But there are other issues that you have to look at. You have to address the issue of displaced persons and refugees. You have several million refugees and displaced persons. They need to be brought back home. They need to be brought back home where you have services being provided and residential accommodation available. So you have that serious issue. Finally, you have the issue with regard to the political process. You have a large number of dissident elements, some of them located abroad and backed by foreign governments. Some of them are extremely hostile to the Assad regime. Now, how do you put in place a constitutional arrangement that reconciles the differences amongst all these different factions is a very, very serious challenge. This is what Iran and Turkey and Russia should have been focused upon. But instead, what you see is is Turkey backing out of the Astana peace process and asserting its own interest militarily in the region, interest not anymore directly linked with the Syrian Kurds, but now linked entirely with its own political ambitions in North Syria. So this is a very troubling development. Another area which we have to look at is with regard to the Syrian Kurds. I think by and large, they would be willing to work with this Syrian government. They feel they have been betrayed by the Americans in October, that the United States is not a reliable partner, and at the end of the day, it is important for them, in pursuit of their own interests, to engage with the Assad government and negotiate with the Assad government some kind of an autonomy plan that would give them space in their own territory. So these are issues that will need a lot of statesmanship, moderation, understanding, dialogue, good sense all round. As of now, this is not apparent as far as Turkey is concerned. Turkey's priorities are all mixed up. They seem to be focused on its own short-term ambitions rather than these serious issues. Another aspect about Turkey that I should emphasize is its approach appears to be linked with brinkmanship, to take issues up to the edge and then try to see how you can get the best of the situation. Now they are, in order to get European support, Turkey has said that they will not be able to stop the refugees going into Turkey, into Europe. This is to alarm the European governments, which have been funding the Turks to ensure that the refugees don't get out of Turkish borders. Now, I refer to this not just as brinkmanship, as blackmail. So you have a situation where the Turkish leader fools around with the entire region, making a number of aggressive statements, going around alienating people right and left, threatening people, blackmailing people in order to subserve interests that are not clear to any of us. So I'm not sure he has much credibility left. I can see his credibility reducing by the day. Not that he still can't do damage. Yes, he can. But I don't believe that he has a lot of support either domestically or regionally, internationally, that he would have needed at this point.
Last question, sir. There is an residual American presence in Syria. I believe in the areas where they have oil fields. What are they doing there? Is there a
It is
larger
very
thing over here?
it is very difficult to understand what Americans are doing. The disarray with regard to American policy in Syria reflects the disarray in terms of their policies in different parts of the world. This is White House today is dysfunctional. Now, with regard to Syria, the instinct of the US president is to get the boys out. What his advisors, particularly Pompeo and the National Security Advisor, want is not to get the boys home, to keep the boys in place in order to subserve medium-term American strategic interests. They don't want the boys home. So you have a conflict within the administration between the electoral and political interests of Donald Trump and the vision, the strategic interests as understood by his officials. Now we are told that there are 5,500, no, about 500 and odd American troops who are safeguarding oil fields. They were meant to protect the Kurds. In October, Donald Trump, it appears without consulting anybody, announced he was withdrawing his boys. So the bulk of the American troops have either gone home or they have been relocated somewhere in West Asia, but 5,500 troops are still there. And this is the main interest appears to be to ensure that these oil revenues do not go to the Syrian government. What the officials have told Donald Trump is that if we don't keep the boys there, then Iran will take away this oil, as if Iran needs that oil at all. So it is, to get Trump to do anything you want, you have to press two buttons. One button is titled Israel, and the other button is titled Iran. To get him to do something, You can mention Israel's interests are involved and he will do anything. If you want to get him to do something, you say Iran is likely to benefit, then you can get him to do anything you want. So here they have pressed the Iran button to ensure the boys are still there. But the boys are doing no good for the Kurds. Safeguarding oil
Yes.
fields that don't belong to you, oil that doesn't belong to you. The Russians have accused the Americans of actually selling this oil in the open market and minting
Yeah.
a lot of money for themselves completely illegally. So you have a very clumsy, a very distorted scenario of American presence, doesn't do credit to the United States and doesn't promise any positive outcome for the future.
Ambassador Talmiz, on that note, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. All the best to you.